So, Rickard Hansson, thank you for joining the AI Outcomes podcast once again. And we're going to talk all things token maxing, or the end of token maxing, I think we could call it, right? There's been a lot happened over the summer, and the party's over. So, the party's over. It's getting expensive.
Party's over.
It's been getting expensive for a while, and who really noticed that? We saw Uber, didn't we? CTO coming out saying, "Hey, are we getting value from all these tokens that we're spending?" Some Chinese models, Kimi K3, boom, it's free, and it's good. But Rickard, so we're going to go through all things token maxing, what that means for enterprise. Want to cover how you distribute workloads, things like OpenRouter, and let's get into it. Rickard, first of all, how are you doing? How's your summer?
Doing well. Summer's been good. Swedish summer this year has actually been tolerable. Not that much rain, being like a kind of even temperature, being a ton of work. I mean, in the industry you and I are working in, it's like you cannot rest. Every week is something crazy bananas you need to move on or not move on or react to, and so on and so forth. So it's been hectic, but it's been a ton of fun. And you?
Yeah, all good. I've been doing some building myself. So I've got an AI agent, which I'm going to launch at the start of September, just to take the kind of heavy lifting out of some of the programs that I run for B2B sellers. So I'm excited about that. It's such a mission. You wouldn't believe you would believe because this is what you've been living for years and years. But the early mornings, the traps, the getting blocks, and bring us on to the point of today's podcast. Once you get building, these things cost money, real money, and those tokens start depleting. And for a inexperienced builder such as myself, you all of a sudden you're quite surprised about how much it costs. But Rickard, you've been coding and in dev for decades, right? What's your perspective of where the market's at in terms of where token maxing has got to, and the realities of that these days?
Yeah, it's coming to kind of like a reality point or whatever, right? Because in the beginning of the year, people were talking a lot about token maxing. Even one at NVIDIA was saying, like, if my top engineers are not spending 250K on tokens every year, I'm going to fire them, basically, right? But obviously, he's talking in self-interest, like more tokens, more hardware. So, I mean, that's a good flywheel for NVIDIA. But there's been a lot of shifts, right? That is kind of putting in perspective. Like, if you look at every model has different pricings, but I think the one people have been talking mostly about in terms of the shift is Claude, because Claude Code specifically, right, has been having those subscription called, like, Solo, Team, Pro, Max, and whatever, which is a flat fee, but you work within a context window, and the context window is telling you how many tokens you can eat and throw out within like a set time limit. And you can see a lot on X and threads, like people complaining about how fast that is eaten up, which means, okay, so how much, what am I paying for, right? And this has been increasing because of the models, right? When Fable 5 came out, they said, like, this is way more capable, but it's way more chit-chatty and verbose. Like, a token output is 30% bigger than it was in an Opus, for example, which means, and you're paying for the tokens, not the output. Do you know what I mean? So sure, Fable 5 might be a little bit better, but you're paying like a premium of 30% either on your context window or credits. And also in the beginning, Claude was saying, like, Fable 5 is too, I would say, expensive to put in a subscription. So we're going to put it on credits. So you have to buy credits and you can eat them up, like $10 in, 50 out per million. That's very expensive. And then you have to backtrack that successfully, like progressively. And now you can use it on your subscription, but only 50% of your context window. So when you reach 50% of your context window, you've been using Fable 5, you either had to pay $10.50 or you have to go down to a lower model. And this is just, I think, signals in terms of, okay, how it looks like on the inside in terms of the actual cost of tokens. And obviously, I think looking at different companies, they're subsidizing the tokens because it's grow or die. We're talking about 3 or 4 big ones like Gemini, Grok, OpenAI, and Claude. I would say the battle is almost between OpenAI and Claude in the open. And they're just like, if we don't grow, we're going to die. So I don't care if we're losing money per token, because if we lose the market, we're not going to exist anyways. Like, so it's back to the Uber days when Benchmark told Travis, like, I don't care if you lose money, it's grow or die. So, kind of weird economics.
It is weird economics. And another thing that's weird about it is, yes, these models are incredibly powerful. And I've been using Claude Cowork extensively, and I've been using Lovable extensively. So now, one of the things that you soon realize is it's not an outcome-based pricing model at all for using these tokens. Things go wrong regularly when you're building, and at no point can you say, well, hey, what we've just been through for like the last day but is still not working in my app, you can't claim that back. There's no seeking it back. So whatever you do, they win. And then the other point that you made was about Fable 5. Well, my Claude automatically switched to Fable 5 when I went to the US just at the start of the summer. And then when I was there, it got banned. Yeah, with the Besson and Trump and the Treasury putting the export controls on it. So it disappeared. That was helpful for me because I then realized, so I dropped back to Opus 4.6 or 5 or whatever it was at that moment. I dropped back to Opus and I was like, actually, it's performing just about as well as Fable was, and it's not costing me so much money. So what am I using it for? But then I realized that that's because I was into execution mode on what I was doing, but Fable was really good at the planning step. And so that taught me, when Fable came back, whenever that was, suddenly reappeared, didn't it? I was like, well, I'm only going to select for using Fable when I'm in planning mode. And then when I go to execution, when my token usage really jacks up, I'm then going to switch it back, save it as a .md file into its memory. That's a whole other story, memory, isn't it? But let's come back to that. And then I'm going to execute using Opus. I was sort of forced into that. And that got me thinking about using different models for different tasks. And then what's your perspective on that? But also then in come the Chinese models, Kimi, DeepSeek, to rapturous applause. And as a sort of civilian in this, I'm not really able to gauge that in the way that you can, Rickard.
No, but you're absolutely right. Like, so these stronger models coming out are more powerful models like Fable 5. What they're getting better at is reasoning, right? And getting more guesswork correct. I mean, by the end of the day, AI is still probabilistic. It's just guessing its way to an answer. But it can be a better guesser, right? And Fable 5 is a way better guesser and a way better intent classifier to understand what you're asking for. And then exactly like I said, the execution layer can be different. It can be as low as Haiku, to be honest, which is cheaper and so on and so forth. But I had exact same experience or epiphany as you. Like, Fable 5 came out, started playing around with it, got banned, fell back to Opus 4.8 back then, and realized like, there's not really that big of a difference. Like this whole red herring thing, like the second a new model comes out, every player, Replit, Lovable, Bolt, Base 44 says, now you can use Fable 5. Yes, of course, because you just changed the model. It's nothing magical, because I do that myself. But the question is why? And like if it's a coding agent specifically, I would say that's more like an executor. Reasoning there is more like, let's get into plan mode and talk about what you want to build. Great, Fable, code, do something else. You can use a different model. And then you yourself then realizing you became the router, right? Like, okay, I'm going to switch model when I go into different modes. And this is what basically OpenRouter and what people are talking about now is, you without thinking are doing what I call in my world an intent classification. What is my intent? It's to do this. Okay, I'm going to pick this model. because it's capable of doing that, and it's going to save me some tokens, and it's going to save me some cost and speed and all that stuff. And that is what, very simplified, what OpenRouter does automatically, right? It's this switchboard in the front saying, okay, use this for that and that and that and that, and you just have to call one end. But I think, and the open models, like it's the window between the frontier models and the open models have been like decreasing by the quarter right now. And next quarter, I think they're going to be on par.
Right.
So then what is the benefit of using Claude or OpenAI? And I would say that's the inference, right? Like it's the accessibility. You don't have to pay it to pay per token, which is great. Because open models are, if you want to run it yourself, it's really freaking expensive. Like you're going to talk like a 30K a month for a GPU or some hardware running for you. And sure, you're going to control it yourself. It's going to be a fantastic performance, and it's going to be maybe Claude Opus 5 capability, but it's going to cost you 30K a month, dollars. So it's, people forget about that when they like, because you use the word open model. It means, okay, it's free, the model, but hosting it, you need to have somewhere to host it, right?
Yeah, of course.
But they're picking up, and also to remember, they're not like, again, open model kind of steers you in the open source kind of thinking. The only thing that is open is the weights, how you can steer it. The actual reasoning and the experts in the AI model is not exposed anywhere. So people are like afraid, what if I use this Chinese model and then somewhere in that little code, there's a little middleware who's just shooting information to somewhere, or you have no idea what it is, like, on the Odyssey, the Trojan horse, who knows, right? So that's like the foil hats thinking about, but it's going to shape up. It's going to shake up. It's going to shape up, and it's going to look very different by the end of this year, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So as the open source models, so let's just refer them to the Chinese models, Kimi and DeepSeek. You're saying they're level pegging with OpenAI and Anthropic's top models.
Yeah.
If I'm running a business and I say, okay, I've adopted a bunch of AI tooling, it's currently using Claude as its brain in terms of being the large language model, it's too expensive for me. Actually, my business case now means, well, I can't just switch to using Kimi because this thing's hosted in China, right? So I need sovereignty over my AI.
But that's not true, right? Because the open model you can deploy anywhere. That's the thing. It's created in China.
It's created in China. But I think, let me just check. What you were saying is, I would then need to have a compute environment sat next to me here, where I take Kimi, build it in my own compute environment, and it's open, so I can do that. And then I'm kind of at the races with, I've had to spend the money on the compute, I already had it, but more likely I had to make an investment in that compute stack. But now I'm running my ring-fenced version of Kimi, and it's not talking to Shanghai, Beijing.
Exactly. So those open models are deployable anywhere. And then you have different suppliers that you can do it like doing in Claude, like Together.ai, for example. They have a bunch of open model as a serverless, they call it, which means you can just connect to their API endpoint and then start using any of these models. You just say, I want to use Kimi, I want to use Gwen, I want to use Quen, whatever you want to use. And you just go for it. And then you pay tokens like anyone else, but it's using the open models hosted in their environment. Or you use Lambda, for example, which is just compute. So you say, I'm going to use their service for a GPU, and then I'm going to put Kimi on that one. But what happens then is you don't pay per token, you pay per hour this GPU is running, and you pay, say, $0.5 per hour, but that accumulates pretty fast, right? And you have to have a pretty significant performance to host your own model. So yes, you own the compute, but now you're paying basically a steady stream, like paying the electricity, basically, right?
Yeah.
Electricity fluctuates. But there's this misconception, right? Like open models is not naturally hosted in China, period. But the fear is that you don't have insight into the black box because it's not open source. It's open models, which means they're free to use. You can deploy them anywhere. But what actually happens inside, you cannot really see. And that is what people are scared about when it comes to the Chinese models. Capability-wise, I would say they're almost there already, and they will be there in the next quarter when it comes to Opus 5, for example. Me, myself, like we're going to... Gainable has to date and are continuing to use Claude. It's actually using Opus 4.8. I didn't see any reason to go up to 5 and combine with Sonnet 5. So there's its own routing. But we're working together with NVIDIA. And NVIDIA has their own open model called Nemotron. So we've been experimenting with their open model. And we have reached now Opus 5 quality with their open model. So we have trained, because you can, with the open models, you can train it specifically for use case. So we've done flywheel training on the Nemotron. So we're going to have our own model running on Nemotron. And then we're going to shift from Claude to that. And that's going to probably run in AWS Bedrock or in Lambda in the end. And in the beginning for me, that's going to be more expensive. But the latency and the speed and the quality is going to go up significantly because it's trained on my context. And then at some point, there's going to be an inflection point where it's going to be cheaper per token when it is where it is today. So that's how like I'm reasoning. It's not because, and also because I want to be able to deploy to enterprises, because then you can actually take the LLM and deploy it on premise and do an air-gapped installation of my platform, for example. Even the LLM, it's going to be the same cost for that company. They have to pony up the money, 30K a month or whatever. But for a government body or military body, 30K is worth everything to be able to do everything air-gapped in the end. So there's a lot shifting around in that sense, I think.
Yeah, so right, yeah, there's a lot there. And you mentioned Nemotron, which is, I think I'm right in saying, is not really accessible for your individual. It's geared towards a business user. Is that correct, Rickard?
No, you can actually, like, as I said, together.ai, you could, or through OpenRouter, you, Ben, can start using Nemotron Ultra as a model instead of Claude. And then you're going to pay a completely different token price. The difference is, like, obviously, you know, if you're using Claude or Claude Cowork, that's on Anthropic desktop application as ChatGPT. But if you use something called Goose, which is like an open sourced desktop application that looks like Claude, then you can connect it to anything in the end. You can connect that to Kimi or Gwen or Quen or blah, blah, blah. It's totally up to you. So this industry is moving fast. And that's why I'm saying, like, what Claude or Anthropic and OpenAI and whatever, and Gemini is doing the least, I think. They're trying to suck up the air as much as possible so you don't even notice that you can do different things. So this is the grow or die mentality.
And how do you flex? So if we come back to this OpenRouter concept, now, if I wind all the way back to how I use, say, Claude, it's very sticky. As in, for me to go from, well, hang on a second, I've set up a project in Cowork. The memory of these projects is iffy, to say the least, and part of using, I don't know about the others, but Claude really, really well is making sure you understand what its memory limitations are, because it's the most frustrating thing in the world when you're saying, I've already had this conversation with you, I've already given you this documentation. It's like, oh yes, soz, I forgot. And it's like having an employee who frustrates the bloody life out of you because you know they're capable, but they're not applying themselves. So how do you, and that's just I've just had my business using Claude. How do you then bring into the mix, and does OpenRouter help you then move different, I want this task to go to that model and this task to go to that model, and then surely you've then got to stay with that model to build its memory for that particular task. Am I getting this all backwards, Rickard?
Yes.
Is it just me?
No, it's not just you. Because like both, in all honesty, OpenAI just went through a pretty rough patch when it came to trying to consolidate ChatGPT and Codex and creating a desktop app just like Claude. Because what Claude and Anthropic have done incredibly well is using the word Claude for everything. So when you think about Claude, you probably think desktop app and co-work. You don't think models, you don't think Opus and whatever.
No.
That's obviously there.
Yeah.
So when you think Claude, you open the desktop app and start chatting with it. So then you're in that ecosystem. And that is what OpenAI is like catching up with now, because ChatGPT for them has always been like the web application, the web app. And now they have a desktop app and you can do everything just like, and they also have their own co-work. I don't even know what it's called anymore. The problem there is obviously you can't just tell Claude to say like, hey, I want to connect to OpenRouter. I want you to use Kimi. I want to use that in the Claude application, because that's not in their self-interest. So that's why I mentioned Goose. So Goose is an open source project. It acts and looks like Claude, the application, but then you can connect Goose to OpenRouter and then start working. And it's going to act and it's going to feel like Claude experience, but you're doing it through OpenRouter, and OpenRouter is going to be the middleware for you that's going to pick the model that fits your task best. And that's going to save you a lot of money. It's going to save you a lot of time. And quality might go up and so on and so forth, right? But so that's the thing, like, you know, a lot of people are like, Claude for them is the desktop app. For me, it's the AI, it's the LLM and the models. It's for me, it's primarily. That's the big difference.
Yeah, and okay, got it. And just for everybody just listening, not watching on YouTube, I'm just doing a screen share of OpenRouter.ai. This is the interface that you were talking about then, Rickard.
Yeah. So instead of, as me as a programmer as well, I can then choose to work with this instead of having my own routing. I can just use OpenRouter. I'm not going to do that. I'm not interested. But as I said, again, if you use Goose or some other desktop application, then you can connect that to OpenRouter, and then OpenRouter will help you pick the correct agent for each task. And then you pay $1 bill per month to OpenRouter. And then in the end, if you look at the actual detail in that receipt, when you get it in the end of the month, it might be $20 OpenAI or ChatGPT. It will be $10 Claude. It will $5 Kimi, because how they will route that traffic in the other end.
And is Goose making the decision, or is OpenRouter making the decision?
Open. So, and also like maybe so there's a thing in Claude, right? And Claude Co-work and Claude and Code and Codex and ChatGPT that you don't see. It's called a harness. And the harness is the orchestration of agents. So there's a middleware in the middleware, so to speak, that is coordinating what is this request? What am I supposed to do there? Okay, now I'm going to fire up the research agent, and now I'm going to fire up the code agent. Now I'm going to do the debug agent, and so on and so forth. That's a harness that is making decisions in terms of what am I supposed to do now. That is happening in Claude, whether you see it or not. Because even if it's using Opus 5 the whole time as a model, what it asks the model to do differs based on your request. And the harness is deciding what agent to invoke, basically. OpenRouter is not doing that. It's just picking a model based on an intent classification. But Goose has a harness. So that will read your mind, quote unquote, and say, okay, what is Ben asking for? Okay, it want to do this and that. Okay, and then, okay, let's route that through in the back end with an intent classification to OpenRouter, and that will pick a model for you, and you will get a response. For you as an end user, it's going to be very similar to a Claude experience. You're not really going to notice a big difference. And the memory you have in Claude, I think that's a human flaw in us. We really think like, I can't move now because I invested so much in Claude. It has all my knowledge. But all you have to do is ask Claude, write your whole memory into a file for me, please. And then you take that and drag and drop into the next AI, and then you're basically on square one. Because remember, every time you start a new chat with Claude, it's like walking into an empty room and you know nothing. It's like the movie Memento, right? Every morning you wake up, you know nothing. You have to look at the wall, and then you have to connect the dots. And then when you're done, okay, now I can answer Ben's question. Because it's a blank memory every single time. But we think it knows. It doesn't know shit.
Well, also, it's bullshitting, frankly, because it is saying, hang on a second, it's saying, no, I share memory across co-work projects. And I'm like, no, you fucking don't. Because if you did, you would know that this what you're saying to me is insane because we were just working on this. And so the unwieldy thing that I've done is I dread opening a new chat window. And so I noticed Claude is constantly compressing my current chat window because I don't want to open a new thread because I'm concerned the memory's not there. So that's really interesting. So, and actually, that is a reason not to, as you just said, that's brilliant advice, actually. Don't let the model make you think it's as sticky as it is, because tell me everything you know about me, or tell you, and you just move all that to chop into Goose, maybe.
Yeah, it's sticky for you, right? Because of an experience perspective. But when it comes to the moat, to the what do you call it? Like the guardrails that Claude want to set up to make sure you can't leave, has never been lower because of the AI models. Because the AI, per definition, by design, is designed to walk into an empty room and help you. So there is no barriers to leave any of the AIs. You can change whenever you want because you feel like it. And it's going to be, maybe in the past it was because of a flavor, like ChatGPT was nicer to me, like the new ones. But I think that's going to be more steered towards two things, price and quality. And coming back to what you say, like, it does have cross-memory and co-work, yes. But we keep forgetting that AI is probabilistic. So one time it's going to guess right, and you're going to be happy as a clam. And then 5 minutes later, you're going to ask the exact same question, and you're going to get a different answer because you picked another node. And you're going to be frustrated and say, what the hell, you just told you. And then it's going to say, like it always, like, yeah, you're right, yeah, to cover up its tracks. And that's like, also, again, back to what I'm building and whatnot, is like, I have LLMs doing a lot of stuff, obviously, but I have hundreds of deterministic validators and skill that goes in and looks at it from a factual point of view, right? It's like almost like an auditor. Some person is writing up a report in a scientific scenario, and then an auditor comes in and say, like, this is wrong. I can fix this for you, but this you need to do again. And that's called deterministic. So if you want to have some really good output in the end, you need to combine probabilistic and deterministic, but you can't do that in Claude because all of Claude is like all probabilistic, right? But when you create your own harness, which I have, the harness is a mix of LLMs, and which is probabilistic, and then deterministic skills that snaps things into place.
Yeah, and so that's what separates you as a professional and myself as a coming into this learning.
Yeah,
is you've got that ability to build the harness, which would be beyond my capability, because I need a large language model helping me drive a lovable or a replit to build something.
Yeah,
that's a significant difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's move on, keeping an eye on time as well. So the next thing that we've seen from let's call them the frontier models, is we saw the whole Figma issue.
Yeah.
So speaking of sticky, I think basically what happened was Claude launched Claude Design, and I didn't realize, but you pointed out to me that was kind of uncannily like Figma, and I think there was a major resignation, not for a couple of days later, by one of the chiefs of
3
Figma,
days
right?
before Mike Krager, I think his name is, stepped down from Figma's board, and he's associated with Anthropic, obviously. And then 3 days later, they launched Claude Design.
Whoa! Oh, so the Anthropic guy was on Figma's board.
Yeah.
Steps down. Hours later.
Yeah.
You see the thing on X or Twitter or whatever. Hey, we've launched Claude Design.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because like in reality, like, have there been any time in history of anything that people just let IP flow freely to an unknown endpoint, which let's say we trust Anthropic, right, and Claude, and we trust OpenAI and ChatGPT. But in the end, you're basically just uploading your business models and all your thoughts and all your things and all your secrets and everything to this model because you need help. And then you have zero knowledge of what's happening in that black box. And if we want to be a little bit, on the conspiracy side of things, what if there is a little sidecar listening in and say like, ooh, there's a lot of traction right now around design or legal or X, Y, Z. Why don't we just build a vertical because we have all the data? There's there's a couple of those, like, Claude is, I think ChatGPT is doing better. OpenAI, they're staying horizontal, but like Claude has been moving into vertical design, but also vertical legal. So it's like having the operative system and then build every app every user wants to use at the same time and have no competition. And that's also, I think, why the open model thing is picking up in interest. Like, we're sick and tired of being in the hands of these frontier models for many reasons.
Yeah, it's like a natural aversion to being stuck with these models, isn't there? That it's almost like every week or so, Claude launches something that's like a segment, like design or legal. It just marketing, social media. It just launches this giant whole market segment, and they're leading the way on ChatGPT. Just looks like it's just copying their Claude's model to try and get businesses adopting their large language model versus Claude, because I guess at the user level, because ChatGPT, do you remember when it came out? It's like just like vertical adoption by users, right? Not by businesses.
Yep. Nope. Exactly.
And so they grabbed all of that market share. I guess the commoditization starts there, though. And Gemini, I go on Google, ask a question, it gives me an answer back from Gemini. That's just trash a bunch of ChatGPT's token usage. But they all seem to be barreling along following Claude. But you can see the commoditization happening. As fast as that happens, you can see it's becoming a commodity. And I didn't realize the term distillation until Kimmy K, was it 4.3 came out? And I was thinking, how the hell's it got so good? When they're not building on the latest, greatest Vera Rubin NVIDIA chips. And there's this whole thing called distillation, where if I can just get hold of your model, I can soon learn from it by throwing loads of questions at it. And I can develop my model. I don't need your internal workings. I just need access. I'd never heard of that concept, but then that further means, well, the race to commoditization is just going to be brutal for anyone who wants to charge for these things, isn't it?
Yeah, spot on. And that's why I think Anthropic as a company is doing better than OpenAI, because they put a stake in the ground early. Like, enterprise is our thing, right? ChatGPT is stuck in the consumer kind of world, I will argue. I think I even saw, like, there was a commercial during Super Bowl from ChatGPT and one from Anthropic. The ChatGPT was, plan my next vacation. Okay, so that's very consumer focused, right? And then Anthropic made a jab for OpenAI saying, like, I ask for a exercise advice and then it will pause it. And it's like, yeah, great. But almost and Powerade from blah, blah, blah. Like,
yeah, it's sponsored.
Claude or Anthropic says, we're never going to do that, period. And if you look at what Anthropic is doing in general, is sure, their models are getting better and better, but they're like really focusing on getting into your workflow. Like the co-work, the Claude, and also the app, they call it. You can tag Claude in Slack. You can just involve Claude in different contexts and involve it in different workflows. So, and that's not a model race. That is a behavior race. Like, that's a product race, right? Because when they release a new model, then OpenAI is going to release a new model, and then it's going to be a new model, it's going to be a new model, and obviously they're going to be better. So that's a race to the bottom in that sense. But, if you want to be a part of an enterprise workflow, it's more tools and software rather than the model. And the model is let's call it the gas, right? And then the software is the engine that makes it run.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And then you've got the same. I don't know how to describe what's going on at the chip level. We have NVIDIA's 500 billion announcement. I don't know if anyone saw it on CNBC, where Jensen managed to get BlackRock, and Larry was on at the end of a call on that same interview, Blackstone, Goldman Sachs, they were all there, sat around raising capital for NVIDIA's 500 billion fund to help companies who want to buy their products be able to finance it. And that's not NVIDIA's money.
No,
the money runners like BlackRock will now go out and find that money. And then you've got, in the same breath, you've got the neo cloud providers. You've got the people like Micron and Marvel, who are the memory on these chips. Everything surged, big pullback over the summer, actually. There's a bit of a dip buying opportunity there for anyone in the market. But where do you see the chip market going? And of course, we've got the Terafab coming down the line with Elon Musk and that team going to build their own chips. And he was saying it's not because the chips aren't good enough. It's because our projections are the chips volume production growing 20% year on year is not enough to cope with what even we've got. So how do you see the whole chip world, Rickard?
We can just apply Murphy's Law to this, right? On both ends. AI started and are still fueled by GPUs, right? Graphical processor units. And they were created by NVIDIA in the beginning to empower games, because it's like specialized in creating and compute really, really fast. And you can make polygons and you can make really cool games and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden you realize like AI needs a lot of compute. GPUs are great. GPUs are incredibly energy inefficient and clunky and big. And they're also designed to actually be a GPU as well. Then you have NPUs, which are specifically designed for AI only, but they're like early days, like pretty not powerful enough. So what you're going to see is like, okay, so we really haven't seen the first generation, in my opinion, that is like where the chips are purely 100% designed for AI purpose. And when that happens, that chip is going to be more capable in a smaller physical format than the existing ones. The reason you have to have these massive racks today is because GPUs are not small. Like physically, they're not small. They're fucking huge. And they take a lot of energy. So then you have like, every iteration, like Murphy's Law, it's just going to get faster and cheaper, faster and cheaper. But now we have a new category of designated AI chips. But that's one thing, right? And then the memory cost has gone up, like, because what you want now is unified memory. You want to have a big chunk of memory of 64 gig or 128 gig or 250 gig, which is unified, which means you can access it from the end to end in one go, so to speak, right? Because that's how the inference is working. It puts all that shit in the memory and then it extracts it. And the more memory you have, unified. So that's why the memory prices all the way down to buying a laptop has gone up, because it's been eaten up by the AI companies or the compute centers, right? But that's also going to, so that's actually what's driving up right now. But the GPU is going to be definitely replaced. At the same time, I mean, the models that, just because you release Opus 5, and the model is doing the actual code that's running those models is always going to be more efficient by the day. The inference, LLM is one thing. That's just simplify the database. The inference in between that what is doing the tokens for you, throwing it in, extracting it, throwing it in, interpreting it, and so on and so forth. That inference is becoming better and better and better. And that's also where they're making the margins. I think I saw a number that, Anthropic grew their number from like 30% or something to 70% in costs because the inference got better. And when the inference gets better, it's because it's faster and more efficient in doing what they're doing. And it's also going to use less compute. So that means like you're going to see a collapse, quote unquote, on two ends, like cheaper chips, cheaper inference, because, they get better and better over time. The compute is still interesting, right? In terms of if you have too much money on your bank, I would definitely build a compute center in some capacity, because it's not going to go out of style. And then obviously you can, hope in 5 years, you're probably going to be able to do 10x the compute in the same physical space because of the chips. So it's still a good bet, but it's incredibly heavy investment, right? But so you're going to see both. The only really black cloud on the horizon is the memory prices and the memory accessibility, because it's just being eaten up by the AI compute centers.
Yeah, so and then when that gets resolved, which I guess it will at some point, I guess we've got the Chinese memory, the Chinese GPUs, which will be much, much more advanced as we go through the next 6 to 12 months. You've got a further reduction in cost of the technology, making it more accessible, which the theory is anytime you make something cheaper, you increase your TAM. So your total addressable market expands as the cost goes down.
Yeah.
So final thing, we're hitting time, and sorry, I was a little late getting onto our episode today, but what's your prediction of where this kind of goes between now and Christmas? Oh, we didn't get onto Iran, did we? And tacoing and all of that thrown into the mix. It could not be more complicated, could it?
No, yeah. Christmas, I don't know, like there's going to be a complete new world. Christmas is too far away, right, in the future.
Yeah.
Prediction for, I would say, like let's pick a prediction for the next 2 weeks, because that's how it that's how it looks like, right? I think we're going to see not in absolute numbers, but it's still going to be a lot of talks about the pricing, because I mean, when OpenAI released their new Luna Soul and whatnot, it was like basically a price cut, right? But tokens are still going up, so in terms of verbosity, so you're still kind of paying the same, like, but so the floor and ceiling are moving at the same pace. And I think a DeepSeek dumped their prices and then they increased the prices. So DeepSeek created a panic and then they backtracked.
Oh, really? I completely missed that.
So I think they're gonna backtrack, or they're gonna publish new numbers in a couple of weeks and say, okay, we're kind of wrong. We're still gonna be cheaper. I don't think OpenAI actually put a Soul, like their most capable model. They promised a specific price cut there. I don't think that's gonna happen. They're gonna keep it like a top tier, and really, knowing like the bottom is going to be where we make our money anyways, the cheaper, more like less capable models. And I think it's going to be more government interference. They're going to have opinions about whatever. I think it's like, that's freaking crazy. Like, they shut down Fable 5, as you said, right? And then the counterpoint from Anthropic was say, hey, you can do the same thing with the Haiku 4.5. Because the Fable was so powerful, like you can hack a system, or you can do it with Haiku 4.5 or Opus, and you can use Kimi to do it. That was like, it's actually in a blog post from Anthropic. And then they turn it on. Okay, let's turn on Fable 5. I would argue, turn the whole shit down then, because if that was the argument from the beginning, that this is dangerous, then Anthropic is out of business, right?
Yeah.
So, and then the counter argue is like, Fable 5 is not that powerful, guys. Take it easy now. It's like so weird. And also like something can be switched off because of politics, not because of capability, or, that's a different thing. But I think that's going to be more of that.
Yeah, more of that, more crazy shit.
What about you? What do you think is going to happen in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think, do we have another escaping model? So we have the chat. But those fuckers wear it like a badge of honor, don't they, over at OpenAI and like that Fable 5. Dario set that whole thing up like a few weeks beforehand. We had him saying this model, it can break out of things. It's the most powerful thing ever. Why are you saying all of this? Because the politicians maybe don't understand the technology, but they bloody well understand if you say something's a threat to national security, which is basically what he was saying. And guess what? In DC or Downing Street or Brussels, those guys literally make livings out of coming down on you like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
If you threaten them. And so I think my prediction is less shit talking from Sam Altman and Dario. I think, and the job apocalypse. Have you noticed how that narrative's kind of gone away?
Gone, and they're not talking
about that anymore, are they?
And not AGI either, like in terms of, self-aware AI is not talking about that. And as you said, like this thing, like it's going to hack systems, not that much anymore. I mean, when Anthropic launched their project called Glasswing together with Mythos, we're going to just invite a specific, handful of companies because it's so powerful. People was like, oh, that's cool. And now it backfired, for them.
Yeah. But look, Rickard, that's brilliant. We're over time now. You're coming on every 2 weeks now, which I think is brilliant. So I'm absolutely delighted about that for the podcast and the listeners. Where do people find you, Rickard? What's the best way to get in touch for a conversation with you about their enterprise and adopting AI?
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn. Find my profile on LinkedIn, connect, DM me, and we go from there. Happy to help out in every and any capacity. I think this is fun. Enterprise is my bread and butter, understanding it from Fortune 50 to 5-star generals. Like I'm working with NATO as one of my clients. I think this space is fun. And I also think it's an untapped space, right? What Lovable and Replit is doing is the SaaS side of things, quote unquote B2C. What's happening right now in the enterprise world is a completely different beast, which I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, thank you, Rickard. Rickard's contact details all in the show notes. Next week, we've got Ben Pickett coming back. Really good, really great response to his episode. Was it 2-3 weeks back now? Doing his AI problems, shall we say, in enterprise, which are getting a lot of attention. So he's coming back on next Wednesday, I think it is. So, Rickard, thank you so much, sir. I shall see you again in 2 weeks, and who knows what will have happened by then. Let's keep up to date on our WhatsApp. Okay, thanks so much, sir. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Cheers.